Hi there, I'm Angela Calla with Dominion Lending Centers and host of The Mortgage Show, Saturdays at 7 o'clock on CKNW. Today I'm joined with Desiree Dupree from 360 Financial Group. Thank you for being here today, Desiree.
My pleasure. I'm happy to be here.
I just wanted to go over the three common questions that we get. When you're getting a mortgage, it's a very important time to consider life and disability insurance. And it is a mortgage expert's responsibility to ensure that you have considered it as an option. So why should people consider life and disability insurance and get it from an independent broker where maybe they don't have their mortgage?
Well, normally it's much better to get it through an independent broker because that means that you're going to own your policy. And the question I always like to ask our clients is, or even people in general, is if I was to give you a $500,000 check, would you rather that go into your partner's bank account or into your kid's bank account versus it just going back to the bank and clearing out your mortgage? So much people, when they think about it as a cash value, well, of course, they'd want the check and they'd want the cash versus just being mortgage free. So that's the first thing. And when you own your policy, when you work with a broker, it means that your policy is yours. You decide how much coverage you need, so it doesn't necessarily need to be tied to the mortgage. The mortgage is, of course, your biggest expense, but you also, if you have young kids, you want to plan their future, you want to make sure that they have enough money for school and all of that stuff. So you might want life insurance that's more than just for your mortgage amount. And when you get it on your own through a broker, you have the choice to play around with those numbers.
That's right. So I know I feel much more comfortable having control of where my money is. And one thing from the mortgage aspect is if you have your policy where the mortgage is held, should that lending institution not have the best interest rate or product or terms for you in 3 or 5 years down the road when you renegotiate your mortgage, then of course you do have to requalify. So I know that it is my preference for somebody to work with someone independent who does specialize in that. Can we talk a little bit about the cost versus value? Because you see lots of different prices with policies and lots of different terms.
Yeah, most people are really concerned with the price. So we get a lot of emails, especially mortgage referrals, saying they just want to cover their mortgage and what's the cheapest insurance available. So sometimes all you want is the roof over your head or the coverage in place, where we're going to talk about this in a minute, but where a term policy is all that you need and it's the lowest cost. It really doesn't have any bells and whistles. It just gives you the insurance that you need when you need it. When you're thinking about disability insurance, there's a lot more things you need to consider in terms of what, like definitions such as whether your own occupation is being covered or whether it's your ability to work in any job. Right? So that's where value comes in, because if you're just getting the cheapest policy, it might mean that if you're able to work anywhere, then the insurance company or the bank is going to say, oh, well, you can go and work in a food cart or you can do these things. So that's when you want to make sure you're paying more for your policy.
That's a really good point, Desiree, because the same comes with mortgages. The lender that might have the best interest rate in the fine print, there might be details that will actually cost you more over time. And I know as a mortgage expert, that's really where we privilege ourselves to educate clients so they understand their options. And I know as well, with my experience with mortgage term policies and different types of mortgage insurances that are available, is that there's also different time periods in which it will kick in, which also add to the cost. And so working with an independent broker such as yourself, you can empower yourself by making sure that you know all the options independently and not have to worry about whose interest you have in mind, because you're not swayed by a particular institution or product. You're very client focused, which is what I appreciate. Right. Now, something that people might not be familiar with, which is one of the options that you talked about, which has the lowest cost, is a term policy. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So a term policy, again, is the lowest cost of insurance. It just means that you're covered for the length of time that you need the coverage for. So typical term policies, it would be a 10-year term or a 20-year term. And what that means is that you just have the coverage in place for that period of time. So if it's a 10-year policy, you would have your rate, which is your premium, would be guaranteed for that 10-year period. Right. And then if you needed the coverage for longer, basically you would go for another 10-year period, but you would be 10 years older, so your cost now jumps up to a person who is 10 years older than what you would be. So going back to cost versus value, a lot of people become overwhelmed because they think they need all these fancy insurance policies that are expensive with all the bells and whistles, but realistically, if they just want to cover their mortgage, if they have young kids, a term policy is fine, because if something happened to your husband and you got a $500,000 check, you wouldn't be concerned about what type of policy it was and if there was cash value included and equity inside the policy. All you really care about is the face amount of insurance, and that you're covered for what you really need.
Yeah, so it's important to have a good understanding of what you need. And one of the great things that I think you pointed out about term insurance as well, Desiree, was the fact that, you know, in 10 or 20 years from now, your mortgage balance is going to go down and so are your expenses. So that's a consideration to have. So I appreciate the fact that you could explain those options and help people understand what they can choose from. So thank you very much for joining me, Desiree.
Thank you.
You can tune into the Mortgage Show Saturdays at 7 o'clock on CKNW and visit us online at angelacalla.ca, and you can visit Desiree online
At 360fg.ca, that's spelt out in letters, and we are 360 Financial Group.
Wonderful. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.